Genesis 41, 37 through 57. All right, let's read. Now the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his servants. Then Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom is a divine spirit?" So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has informed you of all this, there is no one so discerning and as wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and according to your command all my people shall do homage. Only in the throne I will be greater than you." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put the gold necklace around his neck. He had him ride in his second chariot, and they proclaimed before him, "Bow the knee." And he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission, no one shall raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh named Joseph Zaphenath-Paneah, and he gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, as his wife. And Joseph went forth over the land of Egypt. Now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty, the land brought forth abundantly. So he gathered all the food of these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt and placed the food in these cities. He placed in every city the food from its own surrounding fields. Thus Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he stopped measuring it, for it was beyond measure. Now before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, for, he said, "God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." He named the second Ephraim, for, he said, "God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction." When the 7 years of plenty, which had been in the land of Egypt, came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, just as Joseph had said, then there was famine in all the lands. But in all the land of Egypt there was bread. So when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph, whatever he says to you, you shall do." When the famine was spread over all the faces of the earth, then Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, and the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. The people of all the earth came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe in all the earth. Now we'll turn to Genesis 50, verses 15 through 21. I'll give you a moment. This is verse 15 through 21. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him?" So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father charged before he died, saying, 'Thus you shall say to Joseph, please forgive, I beg you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin, for they did you wrong. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father.' And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, 'Behold, we are your servants.' But Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about his present result, to preserve many people alive. So therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones.' So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them."
Thank you, Hunter, and thank you for leading us to the throne this morning. Thank you for your service here, and we pray for God's continued working in your life as he moves you in this period of life to Tennessee to serve in the church there. Well, I want to say something to you, and I want all of you in gear, thinking here, and picturing something in your mind when I say these 3 words. Are you ready? Life is good. Okay, if you could project it up on the screen right now, what would we be seeing? I can look back in life and I see lots of times that I would look and say life was good. I can start out in childhood with some of the times then. We grew up without much in the way of material possessions, but I had 2 great parents. We lived on a small farm. It was good. Life was good being in a home with them and with my 2 brothers. Very early on, I gained a love for reading. My parents read to us, And then just as soon as we were able, which was as soon as possible, learned to read as well. I have loved books ever since I was a little child, and still love them today. Life is good when I'm reading. I liked school. School was basically good for the most part too. And part of the reason for that is my teachers were great. I had some great friends there, as well as great teachers. Gained a real love for learning, which has carried on through the years. I also love sports, baseball and football, especially then. Basketball came on along later, but I loved them. That was the good life as well when I was playing. When I turned 11, our family made a big move. We were living on that small farm just west of Richmond, but now Dad was moving us to a larger farm in a place called Forest, Virginia. For me, that was going from what was the good life there to the best life here. Middle school and high school years can be tough years at times, and there's some tough things that happen, but there were some good times. Spiritually, there were some really great times. I came to know Jesus. I was in a great youth group. I was able to attend Christian high school. I experienced the call of God on my life to serve Him. There were some good days back then. Well, college and seminary followed and also brought some wonderful opportunities to learn and grow, to make new friends, to serve in some local churches along the way. One of the greatest times I had when I was in seminary was my first year in seminary. There was a winter class. We had that month-long break or so there that many schools do. And there was a winter class that took place in Israel. And I was able to go. It was a 2 to 3 week class there. It was great. It was like, man, my dream had come true. I was definitely living the good life. And the only way it could be improved was if I could actually go back again and spend more time there. And so when seminary was finished, the Lord opened that door to go and spend a year studying and learning there. Life has continued to be good many times since then. The day I was married to Frankie was a good day. The days that our daughters were born were good days. The churches in which we served early on, we were back in Indiana again for a little while where I'd been in seminary, and then Virginia later and up to New Jersey. There were some good days in the churches there. Moving back to Virginia in 2005 to teach at Liberty was another dream come true. This was something I had thought about and desired to do off and on for many years. And the Lord opened the door to come teach at Liberty. But on top of that, He allowed me to return to my favorite place. If you'd ever asked me before, what was your favorite place? I would say every place I've lived, I liked. I just determined when I went there that that's where the Lord put me. I would like that place. But my favorite place was always here in this area. And so the Lord, after 30 years or so, brought me back. I also have to say that life is good when our family's on vacation. For many years, we weren't able to take vacations. Well, I mean, we did, but it was like when we had vacation time, it was go stay with my family, go stay with her family. It was always, and those were good. We love going to the beach. A lot of you do. I won't ask for amens on that one, but I know a lot of you would respond. Just watching, listening to the waves come in. I don't need entertainment. I don't need activity. Just God's creation's all I really need. I'm good. Then that's the good life. Frankie and I also, before we were married, we both had traveled some out of the States, and we just had the travel bug, if you will. But after we were married, and for 30 years, we weren't able to do any of that. Between having children and just working in small churches and all, it just didn't work out until about 10 years ago. And we got an opportunity then. The travel bug hit big, and we were able to go. And so we went to Ireland. We've been there a few times since then. Love it going there. Life is good. It's kind of like going home. I'm not even Irish, but it just seems like going home. Last month, we got the opportunity to go to Paris for a week. I loved it. Life was good. I have to tell you that there have been many times in my life when life has been good. How about you? What were you picturing up on the screen here when I said life is good? Maybe you were thinking about the day you got married. Maybe the day your children were born. Maybe for those of you who are not married, that first date that you had. Maybe if you had a long illness along the way, you're thinking about that day when you finally woke up fully recovered and you remembered again that life really is good. Maybe you just returned from a vacation or a cruise, or maybe you're getting ready to go on one of those right now and you're saying, yeah, life was good, or life's just about to become really good. What is it for you? I think we have 94, or at least close to the 94 people in this church who are saying, you know, life was good last week when I got to serve in VBS. Got to see God work in the lives of those 181 children. Some of you are retired. And maybe for you, you're saying, yeah, when I retired, now life is good. How have things been going in recent days? Have they been going well? Is life good for you? Are you enjoying life? More important question, can you see God when life is good? When everything seems to be going well? This morning I'll be talking about the passages that Hunter read, but if we had time and decided to have like a 3-hour service, I would have had him read 41 all the way through 50 without stopping. I'm going to try to walk us through much of that story that we find there. Not every detail, but much of it, and I think you'll be able to follow the flow quite well. Life was good for Joseph. Finally, life was good for Joseph. Things were about to change here in chapter 41. It's not that he had no good times previously. I mean, growing up as a child, it seemed like he probably had some pretty good times at home. And even as a slave and as a prisoner later, there were good moments. Not everything was bad. But when we look at that, basically we're saying those 13 years were not the greatest years. I want us to look at some of Joseph's good times this morning, beginning in chapter 41. It began with 2 dreams. They were not Joseph's dreams. They were not the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker. Instead, Pharaoh himself had 2 dreams. Both of them, for whatever reason, troubled him very much. When he woke up, it was like, I don't know what they mean, but I know I need to know what they mean. So he called his magicians and all of his wise people together to come and tell him what these dreams meant. No one had the answer. Finally, the cupbearer who was standing nearby said, oh yeah, I remember a guy 2 years ago who was able to interpret my dream. His name is Joseph. He's in prison. Pharaoh immediately had Joseph released from prison and called into his presence. Pharaoh shared his dreams with Joseph, and Joseph told him then what they meant. There were 2 dreams. The first one was about these 7 fat cows and 7 really skinny cows. The second dream was about these 7 fat heads of grain and then 7 just basically empty heads of grain. So Joseph told him the dreams are one and the same. They're both saying the same thing. He's saying these 7 fat cows and the 7 full heads of grain are telling you, Pharaoh, that, that there are going to be 7 years of plenty in the land of Egypt. But they're going to be followed, represented by the 7 skinny cows and the 7 empty heads of grain, followed by 7 years of famine. And he says, Pharaoh, you need to appoint someone who's going to be able to take care of this in the 7 years so that the 7 years of famine that follow do not destroy the nation. Pharaoh said, I like your 14-year plan for Egypt. Joseph, you're the man to be in charge. In fact, Joseph, in all the land of Egypt, everyone will answer to you. The only person you will answer to is me. You are second in command in this entire nation of Egypt. Joseph had moved from being this boy growing up at home to becoming a slave who was over the other slaves in the house, to a prisoner who was over the other prisoners. Now he was not just second in command of the slaves and second in command of the prisoners, he was second in command under Pharaoh of the entire nation. The good life was now being experienced by Joseph. 7 years of plenty came in the land. Much food was stored away for the following 7 years. And just as Joseph had said, 7 years of famine followed. I mean, look at the good times. Now, it seems like the tough times, the hard times, the times of temptation, the times of possible even loss of hope, that had come in waves. Now we're being followed by these waves of good things. He was promoted by Pharaoh to this high position. Pharaoh then gave him a wife from a prominent priestly family. He and his wife had these two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. When famine came, Joseph was able to feed the Egyptian people and the peoples of the surrounding nations. Everything was going great for Joseph. And I know I kind of say that, and you're saying, yeah, but wait till the other shoe drops. It's not going to. These good times brought his family back to him as well. And that's a lot of the story through these coming chapters in 42 to 49 through here. So let me just kind of walk us through some of the main events here. The famine spread beyond the borders of Egypt, up into Canaan as well, so that Jacob and his family also were running out of food. Word spread that there was grain for sale in Egypt, so Jacob sent the 10 oldest sons down to Egypt to buy grain and bring it back. Would you look with me at chapter 42, verse 6? It says here, now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And listen to this, and Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. If you remember chapter 37, those dreams of Joseph where his brothers were going to be bowing down to him, it's starting to come to fruition. Well, Joseph recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. I mean, one, because they weren't expecting to ever see him again, but also, two, being dressed as an Egyptian and all, he would have changed a lot. He wouldn't have looked the same. So Joseph accused his brothers of being spies in the land and had them put into custody and kept there for 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, Joseph called them back and told them he would give them the grain, that they could take it back to their father and back to their families, but they had to prove their honesty by leaving one brother there in custody in Egypt. And when they returned for grain again, they had to bring their younger brother with them. Because you see, they had said there was another brother back there. Now they had to prove it. Were they being honest? When they returned home, they found that their money had been put back in their grain sacks. That caused them to be a little bit fearful here. And it also, when they told Jacob, he said, no, I'm not sending Benjamin down to Egypt. I've lost Joseph. I'm not going to lose Benjamin too. Finally, though, the famine became so severe that Jacob told his sons to go back to Egypt and buy grain. And they said, look, this Joseph, this ruler down there, I don't think they knew his name, this ruler down there told us to never come again unless we bring our younger brother with us. Joseph didn't want to send him, but he was so distraught and didn't want his family to starve. So he finally agreed to let Benjamin go. And he made sure that the boys took double the money when they went back. Joseph met them with kindness. If you look at chapter 43, verse 26 says, when Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the present that they had with them and bowed down to him to the ground. There we go again. They're bowing down again. Well, Joseph was overjoyed to see his brother Benjamin, but he still wanted to see if his older brothers had changed over time. So he invited all of them to this special dinner, and at this dinner, he gave Benjamin 5 times as much food as he gave any of the other brothers. I know some of you are wondering, how did that work? Was Benjamin that hungry? I don't know. But he just did. And what he was doing was he was just testing the brothers to see if they had changed. Well, he continued to test his brothers the next day when he sent them away. And he again put their money in their sacks, and he put his own special silver drinking cup in the sack of Benjamin. After they left the city, Joseph sent his servants to follow after, overtake them, and accuse them of theft. Of course, they immediately denied it. We didn't steal anything. But their money was found in their sacks, and the silver cup was found in Benjamin's sack. They all returned to the city. In chapter 44, verse 14, when Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, he was still there. And they fell before him to the ground. Third time, they're bowing down to him. Judah spoke up on behalf of his brothers, telling Joseph that news of Benjamin being arrested and kept in Egypt, when the news got back to their father Jacob, it would kill him. Judah offered then to remain in Egypt and let Benjamin go home. Joseph finally knew that his brothers had changed. He sent all of his servants out of the room and he began to weep. But life was good. He then told his brothers that he was Joseph, that he had been promoted to serve under Pharaoh. He would provide for his brothers and their families. Pharaoh then was told about all of this, and he offered as well to provide for all of Joseph's family. He invited them to come down, and he would give them the best of the land of Egypt to live in. Life was good. Jacob and his whole family, with all their livestock and possessions, picked up and moved from Canaan to Egypt. The reunion of Jacob with Joseph was something neither of them thought would ever happen again. But it did. The family was all back together, and Joseph would take care of them. Life was good. Pharaoh warmly welcomed Jacob to his country. He gave him that best of the land. He gave jobs to the 10 sons as shepherds. Life was good. Well, the famine lasted the full 7 years, and Joseph continued to sell food to the Egyptians and to all who came from other lands. Chapters 48 and 49 tell of Jacob blessing Joseph's sons and then blessing his own sons. The story of the life of Joseph begins to approach the end with the death of Jacob. Though he lived a bit longer, there's not much more information. So this is a brief account of the good times of Joseph. We've seen in past weeks how Joseph responded to having a messed up family. He kept trusting the Lord. We saw that what he did when temptation came in waves was to just keep trusting the Lord. And we saw how he kept going, kept trusting the Lord, even when it seemed like all hope could be lost. So what did Joseph do when times were good? Let me say it very briefly, and then we'll talk about it some more. He still kept his eyes on the Lord. Listen, it can be really easy when things are going good, when life is good, when things are pretty simple in a lot of ways, to forget about the Lord or not really keep our eyes on Him. It can be easy to relax and just enjoy life, giving the good life that the Lord has given us our attention more so than the good God who's given us that good life. When life is good, who needs Him? So where is God when life is good? How are things going for you? For those of you where right now life's pretty good, maybe very good, can you see God? As I rapidly moved through Joseph's good times in life, I intentionally didn't say anything about the Lord. Did you notice? Some of you may have wondered, if you thought about that, why not? Because we often see the good times ourselves without seeing the one who is providentially at work in those good times. Because we see too easily the good times without the one who does good. But Joseph kept his eyes on the Lord when times were at their worst and also when times were at their best. So let's see the Lord here, and we flip all the way back to chapter 41 again. And let me just walk you through these chapters once again. Chapter 41, God was there when Pharaoh dreamed. Pharaoh called Joseph to come and interpret his dreams. He said he had heard that Joseph could do that. Joseph refused to take credit for that, though. In fact, in verse 16, he said, "It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer." Joseph kept his eyes on the Lord and gave him credit instead of taking credit himself. In fact, he repeatedly, verse 25 and verse 28, told Pharaoh that God had revealed the interpretation, not Joseph. And that what God said, verse 31, was a sure thing. That it would happen just as God said. Pharaoh got the point. He recognized that Joseph's God had revealed this to Joseph. Well, after Joseph was given a wife and they had 2 sons, Joseph then said, "God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction." God's given me the good life now. In this time of great promotion and success in life, when everything was going great, Joseph could see God in all of it. We move to chapter 42. God was there when Joseph and his brothers met for the first time in Egypt. Verse 18 says there, Joseph said there to his brothers, "I fear God." He wanted to make sure that they realized right from the beginning, even though they didn't know who he was at this point, that this was a God-fearer who was speaking to them. His brothers kind of had a little bit different view, though they recognized God. But on the way home, when they found the money in their sacks, the brothers' response was this: "What is this that God has done to us?" They weren't quite getting it yet. The 2 different views of God between Joseph and between his brothers were not quite in sync yet. In verse 43, God was there when Joseph and his brothers met for the second time in Egypt. The brothers returned with Benjamin and the money that had been found in their sacks. They seemed to be repentant at this point. Joseph told them in verse 23, "Peace to you, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money." He also spoke to Benjamin, verse 29, and said, "God be gracious to you, my son." You see, through all of this, he continues to speak about God. He continues to speak about the Hebrew God, the God that they worshiped. Notice that Joseph never leaves God out of his sight. Verse 44, or chapter 44, God was there when Joseph began to see the change in his brothers. The brothers realized in verse 16 that God had seen their guilt and what they had done to Joseph. I don't know how well they'd recognized this before, how well they had really been repentant or anything about this, but we know at this point it's like, okay, all of this is happening to us. All of these hard times are happening because of what we did to our brother. We recognize now that it was a sin. We don't see any of Joseph's response directly, but if we skip to chapter 45, we do. Joseph finally told his brothers that he was Joseph, their brother, the one that they had sold. They were shocked, but Joseph continued to speak. Beginning in verse 4 of chapter 45, Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." They came near, and he said, "I'm your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt." Joseph wasn't angry with his brothers. They sold Joseph. He didn't discount that, but God had sent him to Egypt to preserve life. The Lord knew about the famine that would come. His plan was for Joseph to be just in the right place at the right time to save his people from starvation. Joseph was used by the Lord to keep his promise to make the seed of Abraham a great nation. 7 years of famine would have destroyed that plan, but it was God's plan, and he made it work. So it was God who sent Joseph to Egypt, and he blessed him so that life was good. Well, Joseph told his brothers to hurry, go back to their father, and tell him that God had made Joseph Lord over all Egypt. Chapter 46, God was also active still back in Canaan. Because when they got back there, Jacob and his family then put all their things together and they traveled from Canaan down to Egypt. But before they left Canaan, right at pretty much the southern border at Beersheba, there Jacob made sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. There God spoke to Jacob in visions and told him, don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. You'll become a great nation. God himself would go with Jacob, and God would one day return his people to their land. God was at work, both in Canaan and in Egypt. Chapter 47, God was there throughout the years of famine, caring for and protecting his chosen people. Chapter 48, God was there as Joseph's father approached the end of his life. Jacob reminded Joseph of the promise of God to him. He said in verse 3, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me and said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make of you a company of peoples and will give this land to your offspring after you for an everlasting possession. As Jacob blessed Joseph's sons, Joseph again acknowledged that it was God who had given him his sons. Jacob then blessed Joseph and said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys, and in them let my name be carried on in the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Then soon before he died, Jacob again reminded Joseph, God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Chapter 49, God was there when Jacob pronounced blessings on his sons. If your life is good right now, can you see God in it? Can you see God in the life of Joseph? Many of the things that happened in his life might have made it difficult to clearly see the Lord, but it might have been even more difficult when everything was going well, when life was good. Why? Because it really is easy at those times to sit back and relax, just to become spiritually lazy. It's easy to think that you can just handle life on your own, or that, it was my hard work. I was able to get these things done. That's why it's so good now. Or maybe even worse, we may see God at those times and think, I deserve this good life. He gave this to me because I've earned it. Maybe also in a very wrong way, we still see God. We say, yeah, he's kind of like that genie in the sky. All I need to do is say something and he'll give me every wish I have. Where's God when life is good? When it's really good? There may be moments in life when your life is really good. Maybe you're able to do whatever you want. Maybe in a sense, in your job or your home or whatever, everyone bows down to you. People may look up to you as the one who's in charge and the one who has answers. You may be the boss. You may have a lot of money. You may have great power. Everything may be going well for you in life. Humanly speaking, life was really good for Joseph. He was in a position where he could do whatever he wanted, answering only to Pharaoh, who it seems barely even checked up on him at all. Joseph had been promoted to rule over Egypt under Pharaoh. He was a powerful man. There wasn't much he had to answer for. And when his father Jacob died, he didn't even have a father now to really answer to or to live up to his expectations. Joseph was in charge. In chapter 50, we find out that his brothers knew it. Humanly speaking, Joseph's brothers now feared what he would do to them. They knew what they had done to him. Now he had the power. What would he do? So they sent a message to Joseph, and they asked for forgiveness for what they had done to him in the past. They based their request on something that their father Jacob had asked Joseph to do. They also made it clear that they, as God's servants, had sinned in how they had hated Joseph, how they had treated him so poorly, how they had sold him into slavery and deceived their father. And so in verse 18, did you notice his brothers also came and fell down before him? It's at least the fourth time. So how did Joseph look at all of this? Verse 19, Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph said, "Don't fear. Nothing to be afraid of from me." Joseph knew that God was God, and Joseph knew that he was not. Joseph never attempted to take God's place. He didn't ignore the sins of his brothers. He knew they meant evil. He knew their intent was sinful. But Joseph believed that God had a plan, and it was a good plan. He believed that God had sent him to Egypt so that at the right time, he might be in the right position, his current position of power, to preserve the lives of many people, especially God's chosen people, to whom he had promised that they would be a great nation. Famine could not destroy God's people. He had a plan to preserve them, and Joseph, now in retrospect, knew what the plan was. It's clear that Joseph had forgiven his brothers, that he intended to provide for them as long as they lived in Egypt. He spoke with kindness. He comforted them, telling them all would be well. Listen, the God of Joseph is still God today. So I want to talk about just three things about him. We talked about more in these past weeks, because remember, he's the main character in this story. It is not Joseph, it is God. And if you read this story and Joseph is the main character, you get out of it, read it again, and find the real main character. That's God himself. Very briefly, he's the God who is faithful. He never left Joseph. He never forsook Joseph. He always kept his promises to Joseph and to his people. Second, he's also the God who is good. Looking at the whole story of Joseph's life, can you see the good hand of God? And third, and let me spend a little bit more time on this one, he's the God who is providentially at work. God had been at work in Joseph's life the whole time. I don't believe that God revealed in advance what he was doing or where Joseph would end up one day. I think Joseph had no clue. But God was clearly at work. And so as we come to the end of Genesis, we can clearly see that Joseph at this point understood what God had been doing to bring him to this point. Being sold by his brothers into slavery, being falsely accused so that he was thrown into prison. We're all a part. Interpreting the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker, we're all a part of this. To put him in just the right place at just the right time to interpret the dreams that God gave to Pharaoh on that night. And I find Joseph trusting the Lord throughout his life, even though he couldn't see or know what God was doing. Are you trusting the Lord as he providentially works in your life? Can you trust him when you cannot understand what he's doing or why he's doing it? I got to just share with you one way that I've seen God providentially at work in the last 20 years. I couldn't see it clearly when it was happening, but looking back now, I see it clearly. When our family moved back to Virginia in 2005, almost to the day, I think tomorrow will be 20 years on the dot. We moved to a development below Lynchburg Airport, and we began to attend and quickly joined Highland Heights Baptist Church. We became very involved and loved the people there, still do. Not involved there, just love the people there. Frankie's Lyme disease had so greatly affected her, though, that it became dangerous for her in our house. Our house that we had then had stairs, inside, outside. You couldn't do anything, go anywhere without going stairs. I remember 14 of them, here, there, everywhere. We knew we had to move. The only home that had no steps that we could afford. And I looked, let me tell you, I had a realtor looking, but I looked even better. I'm a researcher. I will, like a dog after a bone, I'm going to find it. There was nothing. We needed something with no steps, and the only thing we could find that we could afford at all was in Forest. So we moved in October of 2009, but we didn't want to leave our church. We were so involved and loved the people. But because of my busy schedule teaching at Liberty at that time, it became difficult to be as involved anymore. It took a lot longer to get back and forth to church, and it's just the way it was. And I kept up with that for a while, but finally the Lord broke through. And I remember thinking, can I spend the rest of my life not as involved in local church ministry as I ought to? And that's when it just finally broke, and I said, something's got to change. That's when I knew we needed to find a solid Bible-preaching church that was closer to home. I knew that Forest Baptist had that reputation. It was close to us. So we visited once, not with the intent of really finding out, hey, is this any good? But Lord, if this is not the place, stop us. Just make it clear that we're not to go there. Otherwise, we're in. Okay. I know for most people that's a weird way of joining a church, but that was our way. That was in 2014. I loved teaching at Liberty. I loved the students there. I believe that as long as the Lord gave me health, I was going to teach there until I no longer could. In fact, I used to kind of kid with the students. I said, look, my plan is to be here and teach until I'm like 85 in good health, and all of a sudden in class while I'm teaching you one day, just drop over dead, and that'll be it. It was fun to look at the responses of the students when I said it. Anyway. In the spring of 2016, Liberty did some realignments with all kinds of things. Academic worlds do that all the time, I have learned. And our department with biblical worldview was going to be cut in half. And I learned that my job was going away. Well, I quickly found another job at Liberty, but it was not designed to be a job to last. It was a job I loved, but it was not something that would last. I had become an elder here at Forest in the spring before that, or the spring before that, sometime before that. And I remember when our associate pastor resigned and moved away at that point, we began to look for the next man that God would have serving in that position. And I got to tell you, I had no interest. I just didn't think God had that kind of position in local church for me again. And even one of the others, I remember asking, and he said, Steve, would you be interested? Here was my answer. No. Okay. I remember saying it just like that, clear as can be. But God was at work, and little by little, he moved my circumstances, he moved my heart, he moved this church family to call me to serve here. Who would have guessed? I had no idea in advance about any of this and how it worked out, but I can so clearly see the whole story now. As it unfolded, I was blind. God moved me exactly where he wanted and did so in a most marvelous way. Wouldn't trade it. How did Joseph respond to God? Remember, for 13 years, from age 17 to age 30, he might have had some good times, but you wouldn't call it the good life. Not unless you got a strange way of looking at things, okay? But he trusted God from his youth until his death. And at age 30, he began to live the good life. And he died at 110 years old. Pretty much 80 years of the good life. He trusted God before, during, all throughout. He remained faithful to the Lord even when he couldn't see what was happening. He was a humble man. This is great. Even in these positions of power and responsibility and authority, you never find him lording it over people, but taking care of people, serving people, using his power to do what was right and to serve. And he continually gave God credit for all that he accomplished. God gave the dreams. God gave the interpretations. God sent him to Egypt. God was in charge of his life. God was in charge of this world. And for Joseph, that was the good life. That was his happy place. As I close, I think about Jesus for just a moment. Did Jesus live the good life? If living eternally with the Father in heaven is the good life, then he knew what the good life was all about. If coming to this earth and doing the will of the Father was living the good life, then he did it well. If going to the cross and then 3 days later rising from the dead was the good life, then his good life opened the door for the good life for all who would believe in him. Some of you are going through tough times right now, but a lot of you may be going through good times. If you're going through the tough times, I want to just encourage you once again, keep trusting the Lord. You don't know what's going to happen, but keep trusting him. If you're going through the good times, don't revel in the good times. Revel in the Lord who gave the good times. Keep your eyes on Jesus, knowing that all good things come from his hand. Continually give him credit for the good things that he gives to you. Can you see in some ways the providential hand of God at work guiding your life step by step? Are you believing that he's at work building your faith, wanting you to see him clearly in the good times? Are you becoming more like Jesus? Do you need to know this Jesus that we're talking about here at Forest? Is he moving in your life even now? You're saying, I don't really know him. Is he showing you now that actually he's the one that you need most of all? Would you bow with me in prayer? Father, thank you that you are the faithful, good God who is at work in the lives of your people. Help us in the hard times, times of temptation, times where family around us is messed up, times where it seems like we're losing hope, and in the good times, to trust you. One step at a time, one day at a time, just to keep trusting you. If we pray in Jesus' name.